this one thing, just do it, right? Because there's going to be periods where you're going to ask yourself why you did it. There's going to be periods of doubt. But if you get past it and get into a place where you are feeling comfortable, you have to be happy with yourself and happy with where you are. For me, it brought me and changed my life completely.
Welcome, everyone, to the Road Less Travel Show. This is a show about people that were successful in a different career and left that career to go down a different path. I'm your co-host, Richard Coyne.
And I'm your co-host, Bill Zahller.
On today's show, we have Kavitha Baratakke. And Kavitha, we're so glad you're with us today. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, Richard and Bill. I appreciate your invite, and I'm excited to share my story of the road less traveled.
Excellent.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, thank you again for being on the road less traveled. Looking forward to it. Can you tell us a little bit about your previous career and how long you were in that field?
Sure. I was in tech for about 20 years, actually 21 years if I count the number of years I worked in India before I came here, which is another year. So.
Okay. And then what did you transition to into your new path?
Real estate.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What avenue in real estate are you specifically focused on?
So I started in multifamily syndications, basically putting larger multifamily syndications together. I actually started in single family initially while I was still working in tech, got into passive multifamily while I was still, again, working in tech, and then finally switched over to active multifamily, meaning sponsoring multifamily investments. Now I'm actually doing land development, senior living as well. So yeah, that's kind of been sort of a transition, slow but sure.
Right. And what areas of the country are you focused on?
So primarily Texas right now. In the past, I have done some multifamily projects both in Arizona as well as Georgia. Mostly Texas right now. Austin and Dallas is keeping us pretty busy between multifamily, senior living projects and land development projects.
Right.
Okay. Kavitha, what area of tech were you in? You don't have to say a company if you don't want to, but what kind of things did you do in tech?
Yeah. So let me back up a little bit, right? Before tech, I actually came in 98 from India. So I grew up in India, in Bangalore, India, studied an engineering degree, computer science, ended up in a tech company over there for about a year. And then booked a ticket, came here to do my master's. I came to Texas and I never left Texas. It's been 24, 25 years almost now. So when I first came to Texas, I studied for 2 years, did my master's degree in Texas A&M University, and moved to Austin, joined a tech company, IBM. I don't mind sharing. And initially, I started with software development. Specifically, my expertise was networking, network development. So protocol development was where I started. And that kind of went into client services, partner services, technical account management. I think mostly I never did more than probably 3 to 4 years in a job anywhere in my career, because I was constantly outgrowing that and getting bored. So I just needed something to keep me engaged and learning, I guess. After 15 years in IBM, I switched over to a smaller company that was, it was called Atlassian, worked with them for the next 4.5, 5 years, and then finally transitioned out of tech.
Okay. We have actually a similar background. I worked for large tech companies initially, for the independent consulting companies, and including large firms. And then second half of my career was really working in professional services for software companies. So actually, I've been to Bangalore, and it's been a number of years, but I've been to Bangalore, India, and enjoyed my trip. But yeah, that's great. So
yeah, most people in the software world at some point have either heard of Bangalore or been to Bangalore, because it's such a big hub for software. So kind of like the Silicon Valley of India.
Right. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We enjoyed that trip quite a bit. Kavitha, if you look back to your tech world, in your various countries and companies that you worked for, Is there a humorous story that you can share with us, that's something that along the way that, you know, you really caused yourself to scratch your head and say, why am I doing this?
So I don't know if that was humorous, but there were just times where things happen. So, you know, in my last company, when I quit, actually, there was a reason why I quit. So I wouldn't call it humorous as much as annoying, really. But it was humorous when I look back, you know, when you're removed from that emotion, it was kind of funny because, you know, new people come in and a lot of younger people joining the company. And I realized that I'm sort of ancient in that sense because I moved from IBM to a much smaller company, a lot of 20-something-year-old people, different way of thinking, just different way of being, right? So I had this workshop. It was like a design thinking workshop, and there were we were all like breaking out into little teams and then working on our own. And so I was kind of doing I have really good handwriting. I used to be a calligrapher. So in my teenage years, I love calligraphy. So I usually take ownership of the board. When I see a whiteboard, I'm like, that's mine, I'm going there. So anyway, in the workshop, you know, like one of us needed to kind of scribe and jot down ideas. And so I was the scriber, and there were less of the people on the team. So someone actually complained that I was being bossy. So that's kind of where that was a little trigger or a seed for me. It just made me realize that, you know, I'm working with younger people who have a different expectation of being treated differently. I guess I don't know what I would call it, but I think the younger generation is very different from our generation. We were fine being told something, you know. It wasn't. I grew up in a culture where it was fine being told, "Hey, you're not okay. You're not doing this right. Here's the right way to do it, whatever." But anyway, this person took it the wrong way, and it became a huge incident. And that was kind of. I was just sitting back and thinking, I don't really need this job. Haven't needed a job for the past few years because I had enough passive income, right? So I just went on Slack, sent a message to my manager saying, I'm out. She's like, what do you mean you're out? I'm like, I'm quitting. And she's like, that was a small incident. It wasn't a big deal. But I'm like, no, it just made me realize I need to focus on something that I really enjoy doing, and I feel like I've outgrown this situation already. So anyway, not funny, but it was kind of funny.
Yeah, but it's very telling because it really, you know, it was a trigger that caused you to change your direction. And right. You know, it is interesting because quite honestly, I can see the situation a mile away. You know, you're broken up into small groups. You're given a task to complete the task in a limited amount of time. And if somebody doesn't take charge, how are you going to be able to get done? And, you know, I'm sorry.
The take charge person, for better or for worse. And I'm like, hey, I'm working with the team. I'm asking for inputs from everyone. It's not that I'm not. But anyway, I think what I realized is maybe I'm growing older and I have like less tolerance for this BS.
Sure.
So I think I just interpreted it that way. And I was like, you know, I just need to move on and do something else. And, you know, it's funny when I talk to people in tech now, people my age, without giving away my age, or people older who have been in tech for 20, 25 years, they do feel like this sense of growing out of their careers, meaning they are feeling that ageism in their careers. And for me, that was I started to feel it because, you know, you're working with a generation apart, right? And they have different expectations in the workforce than we did coming in. Not good or bad, it's just different. So I think ageism is a thing, especially in tech.
I think you're right. And quite honestly, you know, in my career, I've retired from my W-2 job and, you know, now do this full time. But I never wanted to be perceived as a job hopper. I always wanted to show commitment and, you know, loyalty to the company. And I pretty much averaged a minimum of about 5 years everywhere I was. And I think you mentioned about 4 years for you. So, you know, but the average IT tenure now is about a year. Yeah. Maybe 2 at the most, but certainly not 4, certainly not 5. And I do think that, you know, I don't know. It's just interesting because I think you're right. The field has changed. And so anyway, yeah.
Well, you touched a little bit on what was there a specific deciding factor? Was that incident? It sounded like you'd also been working in parallel. You've been building up your passive income. So you clearly were transitioning Was that just the final straw, or was it?
Yeah, definitely. It wasn't a big deal, but it was definitely the last nail in the coffin. I had to move on. I think it was just a matter of, I had 2 years before that, I was like, okay, I'm financially free if I do my math, right? And but I didn't really have an idea of what I'll be doing with myself. I didn't know that I wanted to actually syndicate. I was happy being a passive investor, and I was already managing my own single family portfolio. So there wasn't, and it was comfortable. I mean, I liked what I was doing. I was traveling. I was having fun with it, right? So I think there wasn't like there was a comfort factor. It's always a comfort factor when you switch roles and switch job positions, especially when you've been doing something for 20 years, 25 years. You are comfortable where you are. You're used to a paycheck. It clocks in every quarter or every other week. So it was just that there wasn't enough of a push for me to get out, but I already had started creating passive income. I was already on my way there, and I had enough, but just not enough to supplement tech incomes, right? Tech incomes can be pretty good. So I didn't feel the need to leave until I saw a path of what I was going to do next. And for me, it was really important to feel engaged. I wasn't just going to quit and then figure out, okay, I'll just take some time off and then figure out what I'm going to do with my time. I don't know. That didn't appeal to me. I actually wanted at least an idea of what the next step will be. So January, the year I quit in June. January that year, I got a fairly good idea. I worked on an investment as a GP, a very small portion of it though, but I was engaged. I was engaged and interested in what I was doing. And I was like, okay, this could be the path forward. So once I saw the path, I kind of had to see that first step, at least the first step before I jump ship. So once I saw it, and then I had enough drivers pushing me out of my comfort zone, I took the leap and I said, I think my thought process was back then was that there are plenty of check jobs. Worst case, let's say I made a horrible mistake a year later, I'll find another job. So it's not the end of the world. It's not like I'm planning to stay away for 10 years and then I'm ancient and I can't come back to tech. I knew that transition, I always had an option to go back to a job if I did, if it was a bad situation. And incidentally, the next year, COVID happened. And I called a friend and I asked him, what do you think? Should I be job hunting? He said, no, you're good at what you do. You stay where you are. And honestly, I still call up and thank him. I said, thanks for keeping me where I was, because it got uncomfortable, right? And that's the reality of it. When you jump ship and start a new career, there are times when it's super uncomfortable. I'm sitting at home for 3 months, feeling unproductive through COVID. And I had to find other things to engage myself. And that was the story in itself. But I did find something, and that ended up being super productive for me. So.
Good. That's great. Yeah. Excuse me. And how long had you been a limited partner on the investing in some of the assets before you took the leap to go to do the co-GP?
So 2 years. So 2017, I started getting into apartment limited partnership, but I did also join a mentoring group out of Dallas to learn more. So I wasn't your typical limited partner. I didn't just put the money and say, I don't really care what happens, just give me returns. So I actually went and actively toured apartments. I was seeing the kind of value adds they were doing. I was going to Dallas almost every month, every other week, twice a month, just to network with people, to build my relationships with real estate investors. And the goal of those 2 years actually wasn't to be passive, but I was trying to buy my own apartment. The goal was, I'm going to 1031 all my single family homes into an apartment building. And
nice.
For whatever reason, that really never happened. I kept looking and I was really bad at acquisitions. There was no other way to put it. So I spent 2 years. I didn't get anything. I saw a bunch of properties and I toured and I met brokers and all of that stuff, but really didn't have anything to show for 2 years. But I learned a lot. I think sometimes we get stalled. We feel like we're stalled and not showing progress, because progress for us looks like buying something, doing a deal all the time. But progress sometimes looks like learning. Progress sometimes looks like, hey, I'm spinning my wheels here, but I'm actually gaining a lot of knowledge in the process. And it doesn't look cool, right? It doesn't look like an awesome deal and that you're moving and shaking things. But what I realized in retrospect is I also needed to do things I wasn't good at to figure out what I was good at.
Right. People forget that the roots grow under the surface. And that root structure has to establish before you really are going to see anything above the ground, above to build that activity. And I make that an analogy just along the lines of building your knowledge. Even though you felt like maybe it's not ultimately what you wanted to do, that 2 years of building knowledge, investing as an LP, growing and going to tour and learn, that paid dividends. So that's awesome. Yeah.
And something else I didn't realize back then, I can only kind of connect the dots looking back, was that those 2 years, all I did on Facebook and social media was post about real estate. Guess what that did? That created rapport with a lot of people who started thinking about me as that real estate expert, like my friends, my family, my people connected to me on social media. So even though I wasn't intending to, I'm just a social person. I want to share things. And, I'd go to this apartment complex, take pictures with everybody and whatever else. It seemed like just like, hey, I'm just sharing my life on social media. But back then, I think I didn't realize, but I was creating a brand for myself, which became really handy when I actually went and started raising capital and doing syndications.
That's a perfect tie into the next question, which really kind of is along the lines as you made the shift from LP to really becoming more of a GP and doing your own deals. Obstacles. What obstacles did you hit? It sounds like you had kind of in a way preloaded some of that because you started getting people used to thinking about you in a different way. You're not just a tech person. You're now doing this. So.
Right. Yeah. I'd say, I think the number one issue I see when people start doing jumping ship and doing something new is that you can't expect to start something new and have people on board with you, right? Like especially new investors, because it's really hard to trust your money with someone that you have never worked with, and let alone someone who's never done it before. So I think that's when, I found partners who are very credible. People who had done it for a while. They had a very strong track record for my first few deals. I also, luckily for me, I brought in capital, and it wasn't that hard for me because I had built up good rapport with people, friends, so not so much family, interestingly, but friends and other people who invested with me because they, again, looked at me as a real estate person. And then they were like, okay, this person knows what she's doing, and she's also partnered with people who are aligned and who seem to have executed on these projects before. So I think the biggest challenges I'd say I had was just finding the right partners, because I feel like I did have a few missteps there that I had to backtrack and say, okay, no, we're not in alignment here. So for me, that was a big learning experience about not just looking at the deal, but the partners being super important. Because the deal is one aspect of it. As a passive investor, the deal, yes, you want to look at the deal, but you also want to look at, if passive or active, you want to look at who you're working with, because the sponsor, I think, is a number one determinator of how the deal goes. Yeah,
we've said that a lot too, that, it's, you don't know what the future holds, as far as anything can change, zoning, who knows, COVID, things that, black swan events that people didn't see coming, but we'd always rather have, a quality sponsor, a good sponsor, and an average deal versus a good deal and a bad sponsor. The second one's not going to work out very well, most likely. I mean, there's always market tailwinds and things that can redeem things that necessarily wouldn't transpire the way they play out in a good market, but you'll have good and bad markets. The longer you're in the game, the more cycles you're going to see, of course. I mean, to anybody. And that's, the sponsor, like, I think you're absolutely spot on, is the critical part in that. And it's a team sport. Like you said, you can't, no one can do syndication by themselves. It takes a lot of different players with different specialties. Right. Well, as you look back to your first deal, once you've transitioned, out of the tech into the full time into doing syndication. What was can you think of your first victory where you realized this is definitely the path I want to be on?
So I was still in tech at the time. I hadn't transitioned, right? So I was just surprised at how easy it came to me. Honestly, I didn't feel like I was struggling, and I felt like I was having fun. So for me, when my heart is aligned and I feel like I'm having a good time, I'm like, okay, I know I'm on the right path. Because whenever I'm struggling, so struggle can be, not to say you don't struggle along the way, right? I have had my struggles too, but more importantly, I just felt the intuitive sense of being in alignment. Like, okay, this is what this exploits my strengths. And I still tell people that people are always trying to work on their weaknesses. I think that's great, but I think we need to first exploit our strengths to the fullest potential. Yeah. And what I felt back then was that I was really aligned to my strengths. And what I was doing, I was like, this comes easy to me. I could do this in my sleep. And that was a great feeling. And the fact that I can take those skill sets from a previous career and translate it to a new career, like getting on webinars, something I did routinely in my previous career because I was talking to clients all the time. And I could cobble like a presentation together in like half an hour flight on my way to a client. That was super useful when I started talking to clients or talking to investors, because I wasn't afraid of questions, questions thrown at me. I was used to handling clients and talking to them. So I think being able to translate that skills from one career to another was super interesting for me. I was like, okay, I still don't know some things, but I'm okay not knowing, and I'll figure my way out. So.
Well, good. So, Kavitha, is there, in your new role as a syndicator, as a person doing the deals, is there a funny story you can share?
I'm not really good at funny stories, but we've had a lot of them. So the partners I work with, there are two partners, really both. We just have a great time together. We laugh a lot, and I'm trying to think of a funny story. I know we had one where we're laughing so hard. We just sitting at this restaurant, but I'm really bad at coming up with remembering things from the past, and I don't remember the stories. So I think it's important, just talking about funny stories. I think it's important for me, like I was mentioning, one of the things I found out is that when I work with people, I want to be having fun, right?
Right.
And that means whether we're working, whether we're going out for a drink, I want to actually hang out with my friends who are also my partners. So that's kind of been my yardstick now. If I can't really handle a person for too long, then I'm not going to basically partner with them on a deal. So
sure. So there's to ad lib or sort of loosely quote Christmas Vacation. I can see your funny story in my mind, and it's beautiful. So there you go. And Bill and I take a similar approach. We got to have fun in what we do, and we're two of the funniest guys we know. So it's pretty easy to have a lot of fun. So there you go.
Small circle though, but still.
So one of my I'll just say something simple right here. One of my partners, he is from a state in India. He can't pronounce the word, like spell Z, pronounce Z very well. So he says Amazon. So whenever we hang out with him, instead of Amazon, he can't say the Z sound. So he says Amazon is coming. I'm like, who's the Amazon? But he's just so open to, we just keep throwing words at him that he can't say just because we know he can't say it. Like my daughter says that to me. I have a Volvo and I know I cannot say a V very well as an Indian. And she's like, Mom, what car do you drive? I'm like, stop it.
Getting a new one, right? Getting a BMW.
You should get a car that you can actually pronounce the name, maybe.
Your friend wondered why all the meetings were at the zoo.
No. You want to join a Zoom call?
That's excellent. Well, where are you today on your journey as you're growing that? Now you're doing GP deals and expanding your footprint there. Where are you at, and what's your future goals?
So I am right now, I told you, I started with multifamily syndications, value add primarily, no new construction, then started moving slowly into land development deals. So we are doing entitlement projects with investors now in Austin. But just because Austin is such an unaffordable market for apartments and the cap rates are so low. So it was kind of like a gradual transition. I found a very good land partner. Again, someone I was having fun with, someone I could relate to as a person. And then now I'm also my old partners, people I've been working with for a while. We both had a feeling that multifamily has been great for us, but we kind of want to explore a new asset class together. So we are going into senior living now. So we're doing our first ground up senior living project. We did bring in some senior living partner just to start our first project. So I'm excited about that because I do feel like that's the future asset class that will see that has a lot of potential just from looking at the baby boomer generation, 65 million people there. And we do feel like there's still a good run up for us to exploit in that asset class. I love industrial. I would love to work industrial projects, but I don't want to spread myself too thin. So I think right now I'm focused on land development, and senior living would kind of be my sort of on my future radar. And if people come along and I can partner with someone, but not be I don't want to get too deep into another asset class. I enjoy where I am. I just want to stay focused.
Kavitha, so land entitlement, if I have it right, that's sort of the step between raw land and shovel ready. It's sort of the stuff in between. The zoning's already done initially, but then you got to go beyond the zoning. You got to lay out the plans. You got to do the site work. You've got to, kind of get the water, sewer, and utilities stuff set up. There
are like 3 phases, right? So you could do, let's say I'm just buying a piece of land, I'm holding it, waiting for it to appreciate. That's what I call land banking. You're just banking on appreciation. What we do is different. It's development. So development, typically we look at 3 phases. One is entitlement. The second phase is horizontal construction, and the third phase is vertical construction. So the first phase, when you look at entitlement, you're basically going through that whole site plan, coming up with what goes where. So maybe we take a parcel and we say this goes multifamily, we figure out the easements, all of that whole planning. And then we go to the city or the county and we get approvals for what we want to do. So the process of taking it from raw land, like ag land, to something that's not quite shovel ready, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It's more approved for a specific use, right? Or specific uses. If we have a big piece of land, we might say, okay, this part is approved for multifamily, this one for this, here are the easements, here's the ingress, there's the egress. So we have to get the entire site plan approved by the city. And basically that process is the entitlement process. Once we do that, we're ready for actually horizontal construction, which involves roads, utilities, pulling sewer, all of that stuff. And the third section, I would call it, is vertical construction, where now we actually start seeing ground up, something happen in the air.
Gotcha. Okay. Yep. Makes sense. That makes sense. Good. Kavitha, can you, as in your role in doing the development work and the multifamily work, is there something that you do to give back, to help others in some way?
Yeah. So I have been talking to a lot of people about how, besides, of course, talking to LPs and figuring out how to create their passive income. That's one of my goals. It's like, I want to retire more people, because I understand that there is this, after you've been in a career for 20, 25 years, most people want to change, right? I feel like at this point, it isn't like, okay, 35-year career in retirement. It's more like maybe 15, 20-year career, figure out maybe a second career in your lifetime, and then maybe, transition to the sunset. Personally, I don't think I could ever stop working, until I'm ready to kick the bucket. But everybody has their idea of what they could be doing. And I find that I relate to a lot of people in my situation where I do a lot of education for my investors, partly because I feel like there's so much, there was so little knowledge about real estate investing that I feel like there's something that I've been able to learn that I want to share. I also bring on other people like CPAs and asset protection attorneys. I do webinars every 2 weeks for investors. So I feel like that's my give back. And I also started working on this project actually during COVID. Interestingly, when I had this two-month shutdown, I was listening to John Maxwell. I don't know if you know his thing on leadership. So he did this series called Leadership Through a Crisis. I was super inspired by that because I was at sort of a low point where I'm like, did I make a wrong decision? Did I quit my job prematurely and all that? But anyway, during those 3 months, I actually did education for the youth, financial education, which was free and online.
Nice.
And that was sort of my give back because I'm very, very passionate about teaching people how to use their money, to save, to invest, and all of that stuff. And I feel like that foundation is so, if the foundation is weak, you're not going to have a strong person financially, right? So I've personally dealt with a lot of tenants. I see credit reports and I see how money is being mismanaged. So that was kind of my thought process when I set up that program. And I haven't had as much time as I'd like to, but I hope to continue working on that program, which I called Money-Wise Youth Education, financial education. So I started setting up a YouTube channel and got all my daughter's friends involved and put it out in the schools. So yeah.
Nice.
And this year, my goal has been, I want to attend more live events and I want to connect with the audience. Because I feel like there are a lot of, especially as a woman in real estate, a woman in tech, I face this a lot. I mean, there's definitely sexism there. There's definitely like, I cannot walk into a room and command the same presence and authority as a male in this field can, right? So I feel like I want to get out there and inspire more people to, hey, pick up and think that it's possible to scale up their investing, whether they're doing single family homes right now, fix and flips, whatever. Real estate is so much more than that. So I kind of want to talk to more people live. And that's kind of been my goal this year, at least 4 to 5 conferences and places where I can reach out to people.
That's awesome. Yeah. And again, there's no limit in real estate. There's no limit to say that, you don't have the advantage or the ability to accomplish something. So, go get them and I wish you best of luck in what you're trying to do. And certainly also the kids education program is a great thing. Kiyosaki talks about how lack of financial education is a huge problem in this country, and something simple, balancing your checkbook, managing your money. That should be taught in high school. It isn't. Yeah. And that is a giant problem. I have an MBA in finance and nobody really taught me about personal finance and how to manage my money. I had to learn on my own. So, yeah,
so what was interesting was I was talking to one of my investors. He had his kids attend my webinars and he actually attended with his kids. And he said that I learned so many things I didn't know about credit scores and how I could actually boost my credit score and the utilization ratios and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So I find that there's so many blind spots we have as adults that I came to this country, I had no idea. I didn't have a credit score. I had no idea that I should have credit. To me, it felt like I'm in India. I'm just going to use cash for everything. Right. So who knew I needed a credit card to establish a credit score or take a loan? And those are things that I feel like foundationally, I see problems when I talk to tenants, I talk to people. And I'm like, no, you're not doing yourself a favor by doing this. You're actually hurting yourself. I know it seems like a good thing, but debt is not bad when debt is used well.
Correct. So good debt, bad debt. Yep.
Yeah. Well, what is something you've recently implemented in your business to help you scale and grow? Is there any business model or habit?
So I wouldn't say scale and grow necessarily, but I've had this. So I spent a lot of this year being sick. Unfortunately, this year and last year, I had a lot of things hit me. So one of the things I found that is really important to me is to both from a mindset standpoint, because I do believe mindset is so important to your success. Is this idea of, I don't know if you've heard of this book called Savers by Hal Elrod.
Yep.
So it's basically like silence, affirmations, visualizations, exercise, reading and scribing or journaling. I started this years ago, actually, and then kind of drifted off and kind of revisiting that. And I went to this yoga and meditation retreat, and I had a chance to, again, sit back and, it's like when I did 8 projects last year, which was insane, nuts, right? So I felt like I lost a lot of my free time. And I think what I've realized is that it's great to do projects, but it's also it's not scalable when you are just constantly working yourself to the bone, right? I have to build in rest and relaxation times. I have to give myself breaks. So I feel like those make me more creative, and those allow me to work more productively. So actually this year, I'm scaling back on work and focusing more on rest and relaxation and just mindset and all of those things you can grasp and touch and feel and say, okay, another deal, because I feel like who I am as a person is just as important as how much money I make or how much business I grow, right? Am I happy? I think it's become a bigger question than how much money I'm making in my business.
Good for you. Keep it in perspective. Nice. Yeah. So Kavitha, is there some advice you would share with a person that's considering making a path change?
Do it. I mean, if there's one thing, just do it, right? Because if I look back and people ask me, do you think you'd made the right decision? I'm like, gosh, if only I had done it sooner, right? That's really how I feel about it looking back. There's going to be periods where you're going to ask yourself why you did it. There's going to be periods of doubt and uncertainty, fear, all of those things. But if you get past it and get into a place where you are feeling comfortable, and not just comfortable, but just happy that you make that switch, after that, I think it just gets that much easier in terms of knowing that you're really doing what you wanted and not what's, you just were put on a path. Like I just felt like tech was great. I enjoyed it for a while, but it wasn't the path that I would have picked for myself if I had nobody influencing me, right? And I think at the end of the day, you have to be happy with yourself and happy with where you are and happy with every day that you wake up. It doesn't feel like a chore. For me, it brought me and changed my life completely. So my advice definitely would be explore side gigs outside if you're not doing something right now, especially something you're truly like. I'd say if you don't notice time go by and you're doing something, that's probably where your passion lies. And exploit it and explore it a little bit further, right? Take it a little bit further rather than just treating it as a hobby or whatever it is. And you'll be surprised on how much you can monetize out there. You can monetize. I mean, people become YouTube influencers and monetize it. People throw TikTok videos and monetize themselves. I mean, it's just, I feel like the world is your oyster once you figure out what you're good at and figure out a way to monetize it. You just need to take that first step. And you don't even need to quit your job to do that. So.
Right.
Excellent. Well, what's the best way for the listeners to be able to reach out and connect with you and learn more about what you and your company are involved in these days?
Sure. 2 ways. I have a website. It's Cherry Street, like all spelled out street.us, kind of like Wall Street, but Cherry Street. And there's a story behind that. But the other one is cherrystreet.us or Cherry Street Investor Education on YouTube. I do a lot of webinars and YouTube videos, so everything's out there, all my content.
Great. Okay. We'll link those in the show notes below. And really appreciate the conversation today. We enjoyed it. Wish you continued success and want to thank you for taking the time to be on the Road Less Traveled show.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thanks. Kavitha. We really appreciate you taking the time. We'd also like to thank our listeners. Please continue to give us 5-star ratings so we can bring you more great content like Kavitha Baratakke, who is on our guest today. Again, certainly appreciate you joining. We'd also like to thank Park Capital Partners that sponsors the show. And remember, we have the Park Capital Value Add Fund. That's a 506c fund that's out and available today. As well, we also created the Park Capital Partners Foundation as another way that Bill and I give back. And that is a 501c3 nonprofit. Please certainly reach out to us, say hello, and engage us. We'd be happy to have some conversation with you. And again, thanks for being on, Kavitha. We'd also, again, just to wrap up, remember, folks, the road less traveled may be calling you. We recommend that you listen and take action. Thanks for joining.